Welcome to another Lake Lewis Jr. show. Appreciate you joining me. As we always do, we're going to talk about the Washington Commanders. And it's a lot of stuff that we have to talk about, that we have to dissect, because what we saw this past weekend on Sunday, Northwest Stadium, the Dallas Cowboys, who looked putrid coming into that football game, walk out of the stadium with a W. So we're going to break that down. I'm also going to bring in a good friend of mine, Mr. Mike Richman. He's a historian for the team. He's written 4 books for this franchise, really good ones. And he has a new book out that we'll talk about. It's about the life of George Allen. So we'll talk about that. And I'll get his take, as far as epic collapses. Is this what this football team's on the trajectory of doing? I don't think so. But for the sake of conversation, we're going to talk about that with Mike and get his thoughts. If you want to follow the program, if you want to follow me, it's very simple, folks. All you have to do is follow me on social media at Lake Lewis Jr. And you can subscribe to this podcast, which is the Lake Lewis Jr. Show. You can subscribe to it in pretty much any format, whether it's audio or if you want to watch it via YouTube. All you have to do is go on YouTube and look up the Lake Lewis Jr. Show, hit that subscribe button. And you also should be able to see this. If you are watching it now, you should be able to see that subscribe button right there in the bottom right-hand side of the corner. Hit that and you will be subscribed, and you'll get all the updates as soon as things happen and as soon as they come in. This past Sunday was one of those games that I think all you have to do, folks, is chalk it up to, it's just one of those games. I mean, every team has a bad game throughout their season. At some point, you knew Washington was due for one. Yeah, they lost to Pittsburgh by 1. They lost to the Ravens on a final possession where they couldn't get Derrick Henry and Lamar Jackson off the field to get the ball back. The first game against the Buccaneers in Tampa, it was the first game of the season, new regime all across the board, and it was brutally hot. Trust me, I was there. Then you go to Philadelphia Thursday night last week, and again, you think about what was going on, or a week and a half ago, what was going on there. Well, they still battled. They were up, 10-6, if I'm not mistaken, in the fourth quarter. They had an opportunity to kick a field goal with 6 minutes left that would have put them up 2 had they taken that chance. They didn't do it. They went for it on fourth down, and they didn't get it. We know about that. But my point being, my friends, is that this team hadn't played a stinker until Sunday. What we saw against the Dallas Cowboys in that 34-26 loss was an absolute laugher. It was a stinker. It was the type of game that you get out of your system, and hopefully you never have that again in your season, especially late in the season when you're trying to do the unthinkable and make the playoffs. And I think for most fans out there who are starting to say, I think this team is done. I think we thought they were better than what they were. No, they're not. I don't think they're done at all. And I do think that they are a good football team. Are they an elite football team? Hell no. I think we see that now. But are they a good football team? They are. They're a good football team. They're 7-5 with everything in front of them, and everything is set up for them to be able to accomplish, like I said, the unthinkable, and that's to make the playoffs. If you were to ask me before the season, well, maybe not me, because I see these guys every day, practice, blah, blah, blah. And I actually said this team was no worse than a 9-win season. Got it on receipts. You can go back and check the podcast. It's there. I said this team is no worse than a 9-win season. And I said that back in July. Okay. To me today, they're no worse than a 9-win football team. Nothing has changed. I still think this team wins 10 games. I think this team has a chance to win 11 games and do something that they haven't done in 32 years, 33 years to be precise, and that's win 11 games. Matter of fact, they're the only team in the NFL to not have done that over that time span. So I do think that they have a legit opportunity to do this. I think they can get it done, but they can't have an outing like they did on Sunday. That was, to me, a microcosm of this team in general. I think we all know that this was a team that was going to be challenged this year because it was a huge, new roster. They brought in 30 new players, new faces. That's not even including the practice squad. Some of the guys on the practice squad. Chris Rodriguez, Cole Turner. Some of those guys were on the regular season roster last year, and they're on the practice squad. I know Chris Rodriguez is being called up. He's just today was signed as a free agent again, and we all knew that. And he's going to be playing on Sunday because they have the injuries to Brian Robinson and Austin Eckler, who both may be out of the game. I actually would be shocked if Austin Eckler played. I don't expect him to play, not after the concussion that he had, the second one he's had this season. So Chris Rodriguez is up. But I think when we go back to Sunday, you see some of the deficiencies now. That's what we're seeing. We're seeing the devoid in talent in certain key areas. And it starts at the skill set positions. Terry McLaurin, we know about him, Pro Bowler, having his best season, another miraculous play, that we thought was going to be the second miracle in Northwest Stadium. Obviously, what was that? With 24 seconds left, he gets I think it's 86-yarder that he takes to the house. Okay. We thought we were going to see an extra point that was going to tie it. But unfortunately, Austin Seibert, who had a horrific day, just from kicking off to field goals, it was just one of those days. Well, today, Austin Seibert was put on IR. So not so sure, but I did say this on Sunday. I said it in our post game. He didn't look right. He absolutely did not look right. I thought, in pregame, he was kicking strongly. He looked really good. But during the game, he just didn't look right. His leg did not look like the guy that was pretty much automatic for this football team since they signed him right before that week 2 win, of the New York Giants, where he had 7 consecutive field goals. So you saw something wasn't right. But overall, this football team couldn't make the plays that they needed to make to get the W. I don't care how bad Dallas is this year, and they're bad, but they beat a Washington team that's trying to make the playoffs. And for my money, it exposed Washington. It showed that they don't have the playmakers on the back end to, intercept passes and do things. I think Mikey Sainristil is probably their best playmaker in the secondary as far as tracking a football. As far as tackling and hitting and, Jeremy Chin is having a monster season. Quan Martin's an ascending young safety in the league. But they just don't have on the outside. They don't have a bunch of guys that can break on footballs, that can intercept passes. That's why you went out and you get Marshawn Lattimore, and he's still working his way back from a hamstring injury. Okay. But then on the offensive side of the ball, too many drop passes. I'm not going to put this on Jaden Daniels because everyone's like, oh, he's regressing and he doesn't look like the same quarterback we saw in the beginning of the year. Of course he doesn't, because it's called tape. It's called NFL defensive coordinators. They make money for a reason. They're defensive coordinators for a reason. And now there's tape on Cliff Kingsbury's offense in Washington and what he's trying to do. And Cliff Kingsbury hasn't shown a counterpunch. He hasn't shown the ability to be able to counter what defenses are now doing. And for me, it all started in Baltimore. I was at that one too. Baltimore had Roquan Smith in the middle of the field, and he basically shadowed Jaden Daniels. They would not let Jaden Daniels run the football on them. They wouldn't let Jaden Daniels get loose, basically. They basically said, Jaden, you and Terry are going to do your thing, but no one else is going to contribute to a W. And I think that that's been the blueprint going forward for all these defensive coordinators, all these different defenses. Pittsburgh kind of did the same thing. They basically said, no one else is going to beat us out here. I know Noah Brown has had some really tough catches, but he's had some drops too. Zach Ertz, as professional as he is, great guy, the consummate pro. He's not the young Zach Ertz that we saw in Philadelphia. He's a guy that's having some drops right now, and it's becoming contagious. De'Ami Brown is having some drops. The problem is, folks, these drops are coming at the most inopportune times in games. These things are coming where you can sustain a drive, where you can get another first down and get out of a funk, where you can just, the more you're on the field, the more you start to get lathered up, the more you start to produce. And we're seeing too many 3 and outs for this Washington offense. Matter of fact, so a good friend of mine in the press box, mentioned to me, David Harrison, Sports Illustrated, mentioned to me, that I think over the first, 13 weeks, this team, I'm sorry, 13 weeks, I'm sorry, 11 weeks, this team had like 8 3 and outs on the season. They've had that many or more over the last 2 weeks. So understand what I'm saying. 8 and outs. I mean, 3 and outs. They had 8 leading up until maybe 2 games ago. And now over the last 2 games, they've had more than they had in the previous 11 games. So what I'm saying is that this team is struggling offensively, and they're going to have to put it together if they're going to make the playoffs. So look, we're going to take a break. And when I come back, I'm going to have my friend Mike Richman on. We'll get his take on this Washington Commanders football team. We'll talk about his books. And he also had something happen over the past weekend that was it was pretty amazing, folks. And I'm very proud of him. We'll talk about that when we come back right here on the Lake Lewis Jr. Show. All right, so now we're going to get ready to bring in Mr. Mike Richman. Really needs no introduction, and here he is with us right now, the man of the hour. So, how are you today?
I'm okay. I'm ready to rock and roll with Mr. Lake Lewis. I know we had a great discussion about 15 years ago, and I always
Yeah.
tell people, Lake, you asked me the greatest question I've ever been asked in any of the interviews. The four members of um,
The
the
Mount
South Dakota
Rushmore, the Mount
Mount
Rushmore.
Rushmore, four the four names of the Redskins who deserve to be on Mount Rushmore. That
Yes,
was the best.
and you got it. You mean you listen? You want to do that real quick, just for our viewers and listeners, because listen, you're the guy. I mean, you're the guy that I seek out in the press box if I have a trivia question or a historical question, and we'll talk about everything that you do as well. But that
Right.
Mount Rushmore for Washington, has it changed over the years for you, or is it still the same?
I don't think anything has changed up to this point. If Sean Taylor had continued his playing career, he
Mhm.
certainly would have garnered,
Yeah,
some respect and possible place on that Mount Rushmore.
yeah.
But I think it stands as is. It was Riggins, Daryl Green,
Hmm.
Sammy Baugh,
Hmm.
and you asked me. You said I can include a coach, and I
Yeah,
included Gibbs.
yeah, and I think, and so for everyone to know, my four differed and with one person. And you remember, I said I couldn't put John Riggins on there because he wasn't an original Redskin. He was a guy that had a little bit of success with the Jets and then came over. And yeah, I mean, he played the bulk of his career in Washington. I get it, on 2 different stints actually, but for me, I think I would have put Charlie Taylor on there. Just, he's a
Right.
Hall of Famer and he pretty much played the bulk of his career, if all of it, in Washington, right?
He absolutely did. He definitely, deserves consideration. I think I remember though you were high on Art Monk. Like I think your question was,
I was.
you said because you included coaches, that's why I put Joe
Mhm.
Gibbs on there.
Yeah.
But if coaches were not allowed, then Art Monk definitely would have been on there.
So let me throw another guy out at you, and then we'll get into all our stuff today. Chris Handberger. People don't realize this guy was not just a Pro Bowler, but he was a All Pro for like 7 years, and that just doesn't come around the block often.
Multiple All Pro, multiple Pro Bowler. He was just first of all, he was one of those quiet players. He
Okay.
didn't make a whole lot of noise out there, literally and figuratively.
Hmm.
He just let his play do the talking. And yeah, great player in the Pro Football Hall of Fame. Definitely worthy of that. And speaking of linebackers, I want to ask you this question because you saw his career here in Washington.
Okay.
London Fletcher. Okay. Now, I had an interesting discussion
Hmm.
with Fred Smoot a few weeks ago at the alumni game.
Okay.
And Smoot actually thinks London Fletcher should be in the Hall of Fame. And I compared London Fletcher's career with Ray Lewis. Okay. I
Okay.
think that's the best direct comparison.
The
And
stats are very similar.
very similar stats. Now, Lewis had a lot more all pro seasons, a lot more Pro Bowl years. He was a Super Bowl MVP, first ballot Hall of Famer. Obviously, he was worthy of all of that. But if London Fletcher's stats are so similar to Ray Lewis, and also London Fletcher was even more of an Iron Man than Ray Lewis,
Hmm.
I personally believe that he deserved serious consideration for the Hall of Fame. What do you think?
Oh no, I think he's a Hall of Famer. I'm actually surprised that Mike, we even have to have this conversation because he is, to me, you can make an argument that he was a first ballot Hall of Famer. I mean, everywhere he was, go back to his days with the Rams. I mean, he was a key proponent, a key player for that defense, who,
Right.
by the way, was in the Super Bowl. So
He has a Super
he's
Bowl ring, definitely.
absolutely he has a ring, so he's had some success
Right.
even before he came to Washington. And when he came to Washington, people thought he was old and done. No, he had some of his greatest seasons,
Oh
in
my
the middle of
God,
the
he was
field
he
for
was so
Washington.
effective, and I mean, he was leading the team in tackles year after year. I
Yeah,
mean, he was in on seemingly almost every stop on defense. I
yeah.
mean, he
He's absolutely unequivocally should be in there. But unfortunately, you've done this for a long time as far as breaking down the Redskins, now the Commanders, and there's a lot of players that I personally feel like should be in the Hall of Fame, and it shouldn't be 20 years later, 30 years later. Some of these guys, to me, like a Joe Jacoby's a first ballot Hall of Famer. If you look
right.
at who he was lining up against on the other side of the ball during his era, the Lawrence Taylors, the Richard Dents. I mean, the list can go on and on. Those guys are in the Hall of Fame. So why would he not be if he held his own against those guys?
Right. Here's what I say about Joe Jacoby, okay? Yes, he should be in the Hall of Fame. Whether he was a first ballot Hall of Famer, I don't know. See, the argument I heard against him being inducted so quickly after Russ Grimm is that, okay, a hog got in. All right, now, right. Now we're going to have to wait a little bit until Jacoby gets his turn to get in. Okay.
Mm.
I think at this point he does deserve it. But you mentioned Lawrence Taylor, and the thing people remember a lot about Joe Jacoby, and Lawrence Taylor burned a lot of offensive linemen. Okay.
Sure.
He
Hmm.
embarrassed so many people on the offensive side of the ball. That's what a lot of people remember about Joe Jacoby in the 1980s, that Lawrence Taylor was just, running past him so fast, and
Hmm.
Jacoby, these were the national, big televised games
Yeah.
back in the heyday of the Redskins Giants rivalry. I
Yeah.
mean, that's what a lot of people remember about Jacoby. But still, the 80s, he had his greatest years. I think he was an all pro for 4 consecutive seasons. He definitely at this point should be in the Pro Football Hall of Fame. And also, the analogy I was making between Fletcher, you brought up Hamburger. That's
Hmm.
kind of the comparison I was making between the two. Very, very quiet players.
Yeah. Yeah.
They let their play do their talking on the field. And that's basically the situation with Hamburger. It took him a long time to get in the Pro Football Hall of Fame. And I hope London Fletcher does get in, because I definitely think he's worthy of it.
Well, is that what this thing has come down to? Is that the Hall of Fame now is a popularity
Popularity
contest?
contest.
I,
Yes.
I
It's a
thought it
beauty
was for the
contest.
well, I thought it was for the best players on the field. I mean, I just thought the shrine, to be in there was because you did damage when you played on the field, not because
Right.
you talked a lot, not because you got in trouble off the field. Because it seems like now you almost have to be a character in order to get looked at, and that's not fair to the guys that went about their business. And I mean, look, Barry Sanders was, great moves on the field, but when he scored, what did he do? He just handed the football to the
And the
referee and
football.
kept going to the sidelines. I mean, isn't that what this is supposed to be about?
It's
Like,
supposed to be exactly about that. That's it. It's a meritocracy and based on how well you do on the field. But unfortunately, it is a beauty contest. Let me ask you something.
yeah.
Kurt Warner, all right? He's a Hall of Famer today. Does he deserve to be in the Hall of Fame? I
See,
mean,
see, I love Kurt Warner's game. I really did. I loved his story. I love his resiliency as far as his career. But I didn't think he was a Hall of Famer, at least not as early as he got in,
right.
because there were some other guys that I thought equally had the same kind of careers. But again, he played for the greatest show on turf, and then he took the Cardinals to the Super Bowl as well.
Right.
Um,
And now he's on national TV,
absolutely,
giving NFL analysis every Sunday.
yeah.
So this is what we have.
Popularity
I don't what's that?
popularity contest. That's what
It
it
is,
is.
yeah. I don't want to say, that is the reason that he's in, but it certainly helps. You have that visibility out there, so people
Sure.
know who you are. Your name continuously comes up, and then when you have eligibility for the Hall of Fame, you're out there, and it could be a little easier to be selected. These other guys who are quiet over the years, and even guys from way back when. I mean, there's so many players from yesteryear who deserve to be in the Hall of Fame. I'm a member of the Pro Football Researchers Association,
Yeah.
and there's a really cool category called the Hall of the Very Good. Okay. These are
Okay.
players who have been overlooked, who have not gotten into the Pro Football Hall of Fame, the Hall of the Very Good. Hamburger was once in the Hall of Very Good.
Well,
Okay.
I would imagine there's probably a bunch of former Redskins in that
Pat
department.
Fisher's in there too.
Oh, come on.
Larry Brown, he's
Uh,
in there as well.
these are all Hall of Fame caliber football players. And the thing that bothers me about this, and not to stray, because I do want to, we have a lot more to
Yeah,
break
yeah. We have
down,
a lot more to talk about.
but the thing that really bothers me about this is it's almost as if the Joe Gibbs Redskins teams, the four teams that went to Super Bowls, the three that won, it's almost like they're penalized for just going about their work, and a workman-like product, and not a whole bunch of glitz and glamour. Yeah, I mean they had the Hogs, perhaps one of the
Heisman.
greatest offensive lines. You had the Fun Bunch, you had the Smurfs. So there were a lot of
Right.
little gimmicky nicknames. But as far as the players individually, you just didn't have a whole lot of guys that talked a lot, that talked a lot of trash. They just beat you up on the field.
Except for Joe Theismann, though. The thing about him was, he opens the refrigerator door, he'll just start talking. So, but that
Well,
82 team of the Redskins, first of all, if there hadn't been a strike, would that team have been in the Super Bowl? I think that is a valid point to make. And I think that's a reason why those teams in the 80s,
yeah.
compared to the 49ers, who did it in every season, that was a complete season, I think that's why those teams are overlooked a bit.
Yeah, and
Okay.
then the '83 team doesn't do itself a favor
Right. They didn't
by
even win a
getting
Super
smoked in the Super Bowl. So
Bowl. Right.
even though to me that's still with what my eyes have seen, that's one of the greatest teams I've ever seen in my life.
Oh, yeah.
They just took the Raiders for granted because I guess they had beat them during the regular season. But Marcus Allen didn't play in that game, if I recall. And the Raiders were pretty PO'd about that. They felt like there was revenge on the way.
Yes. I would compare that 83 Redskins team to, in a way, the 2007 Patriots. Patriots, obviously, 16-0, much, better record. The Redskins
Yeah,
were 14-2 that year. Patriots lost the Super Bowl, though, Super Bowl 42, major upset to the Giants. We remember that 2007 Patriots team, but it didn't achieve all of the fame that it could have because it didn't
absolutely.
win a Super Bowl. That team would have probably gone down as the greatest
As the
team
greatest team of
in
all time.
NFL history.
Yeah, without question. So, look,
Right.
folks, right now I'm talking with Mr. Mike Richman. He's the team historian. He's the author of 4 books, and I can say that now because you have a new book out, and it talks about George Allen. So, we're going to talk about a George Allen team here in a second, and then we're also going to talk about a Jack Pardee team in reference to what's happening with the team today. So let's talk about what we saw. Obviously, we saw each other in the press box on Sunday. Is this? I don't want to say it's not a collapse yet. It's not, but it's trending in a bad way right now. Okay, they've had 3 losses, straight losses. If you take away the Hail Mary against Chicago, you kind of could be looking at 4 losses.
Right.
I've been saying this, Mike. Their schedule sets up really nicely for them now to get to 10 wins, maybe even possibly 11 wins. But what after I saw Sunday against the Cowboys, it doesn't give me that confidence that I had before that they're going to take care of the business that they're supposed to. What did you see Sunday that's alarming to you?
Number one, I think NFL defenses have caught up to the Redskins offense in a
Hmm.
way. I
Hmm.
mean, I think that's kind of what we've seen in recent weeks. I mean, the offense has slowed down seriously. I mean, Cliff Kingsbury, he got a lot of acclaim the first half of the season, for his creativity, imagination on offense. But as well as I do that NFL defenses, they catch up to talent on the offensive side of the ball really fast. Okay.
Absolutely.
So I think that's one major reason that the offense has slowed down. Now, Jaden Daniels, he had kind of mediocre games against the Steelers and Eagles, but his stats were not that bad on Sunday. I mean, 25 of 38, had
I
about
mean, he had
200
over
yards
300.
passing.
Yeah, he had over 300 total all-purpose yards and
Right.
3 touchdowns.
His running looks pretty good. I mean,
Yeah,
you could say that the rib injury was still bothering him in those losses to the Steelers and Eagles, but he looked good
hmm
on Sunday. I still think though defenses have caught up to him a little more,
hmm
and he's kind of hitting a little bit of that rookie wall right
yeah,
now.
yeah,
Okay. Everybody was so excited in the first half of the season of what we were seeing with him. I was saying, okay, we got to slow down a little bit. And just to, I was saying defenses in the NFL, they're going to catch up to him at some point. But still, I mean, he didn't look that bad against the
no,
Cowboys. It's just that they just looked so disoriented the whole game. I mean, there were 4 possessions in the first half. We were on their side of the field and we came away with 3 points.
yeah. I mean, they literally in the game on Sunday, they had the ball. If I'm not mistaken, I counted this. It was 5 times at the 40-yard line where they started, and not
Right.
where they moved the ball to. I'm talking about now. It was on their side of the field, but still,
Five times on that, starting at the 40 on their side of the field.
yeah, no, on Washington side.
On all
But
Washington,
but
right.
still, you're 10 yards from midfield, and
Right.
you're not able to punch the ball and you're not able to do things. And it does seem like I'm starting to think this analogy might come into play here where teams have said, they're doing the Washington's offense what a lot of teams do on defense. Sometimes the Commanders do this on defense. They'll let you move the ball in between the 20s, but when you get in the
Right.
red zone, now you got to make a play. And some guys aren't capable of doing that. And I think what we're seeing with Washington is their struggles are coming on the short side of the field. And it's because now teams are going to take Terry away from them, from Jaden. And now someone else is going to have to beat you. And I'm seeing too many drop passes now. I mean, it's
I We saw a lot of that in the Steelers game.
a
A
lot of that. And we
lot.
saw a lot of that Sunday. And I mean,
Right.
Mike, these passes aren't just being bobbled, they're hitting guys in the face mask. So it's,
Right.
so maybe what we're seeing now is, it's come to life now. We knew this team, this was a recalibrated year. They started off strong 7-2. And I'm not going to say I got ahead of myself because I still think they're going to make the playoffs. I truly believe that.
Mm.
But this team was showing me that perhaps they could be a team that, could be a team that could fight to get to Detroit for an NFC championship and probably lose. I think Detroit's going to the Super Bowl, but I
Right.
think that that's what everyone was playing for. Who's going to be runner up to Detroit? And I don't know now because Philly has really taken
It
that
looks
step
like the Eagles
forward.
are going to be challenging the Lions. I mean, they looks like those two teams are going to end up in the NFC Championship. I mean, when the Eagles got AJ Brown back, when I was saying that's the
It
component of
opened
their
it up.
offense that really need. Hurts is now looking like the quarterback of 2022. I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah,
they look like a powerhouse team. I mean, the way they beat the Rams the other night. I
yeah.
mean,
I mean,
that was just phenomenal.
when you have a running back from Penn State, that's just going
Right.
to happen.
I know you're a little biased about that, but you're speaking correctly. Barkley, you tell me, I don't understand why the Giants could not renegotiate his contract.
He
I
wanted to stay there too. So
I just could not
shame
understand
on
that at all.
it's called, unfortunately, we've seen this in this town too many times where people think they're smarter than everyone else in the room. And it comes back and it bites you in the tail. And I think for the Giants to see him doing this with a divisional rival has to drive the stake in even further. I mean, they botched that. And then for them to release Daniel Jones, I mean, my gosh, like you didn't
Right.
get anything for either one of those players. And they were your two best players. You didn't get anything for them. No draft picks, no money, no nothing. That's a bad look. To me, that's a fireable offense.
You know,
If I was
I'm
an
sure you,
owner, I'm cleaning house.
I'm sure if you heard the rumor flying around that hey, with the release of Daniel Jones, let the Cowboys pick him up for the Thanksgiving game, the Giants Cowboys game.
you know, listen,
It's not going to happen, but
yeah, I
that
mean,
was the rumor flying around.
I think Cooper Rush may have saved that, from happening. But
Right.
listen, so one of the things that I wanted to throw out, and then we're going to talk about two things. And before we get into that, I do want to commend you and congratulate you because Folks, we're looking at a gentleman right now that's in a Hall of Fame himself. We're sitting there talking about Hall of Fames and why guys can't get in. Well, you're never going to have to worry about that because you were inducted into the Greater Washington Jewish Sports Hall of Fame.
Got it.
Congratulations. Congratulations.
Thank you very much, Lake. Yeah, I mean, this is the ultimate for me in terms of my journalism career, and just the privilege of being in a Hall of Fame with names like Shirley Povich and
Oh,
Glenn
man.
Shapiro and George Solomon, Steve Buckhands, Andy Poland is in there. I mean, there's so many other iconic names who were involved in sports in the DC area
Yeah.
just to be a part of that. I mean, it's a major honor. And I should also say, and of course, I'm going to preface this by saying I was nowhere near your caliber of college basketball. I grew up in the gym where the event took place Saturday night. I grew up in that gym. That was my second home playing basketball. Okay,
Not,
so
not.
yeah, it was like a homecoming for me when to be part of the list of inductees that night. But it was really it was a fun event, and the money raised, they raised more than $500,000 at that event, and the
Wow.
money goes toward their summer camp. A large percentage of that camp is for underprivileged kids. No, I'm sorry, for handicapped kids. They
Okay.
showed a video. There were several kids you could see with Down syndrome, so it was really moving. But you knew that money went to a very worthwhile cause.
No, man. I mean, that's well earned. And like I said, you were one of the first people when I came back to this town from Florida. I was at ESPN Radio when I came back here. My mind is always thinking stats. You know that about me and history. I love history. And then when I sat down and talked with you, it was, man, it was a dream come true, and we've remained friends ever since. I
That was
mean,
a great interview.
you are the guy. I'm telling you, you are the guy that even if I hear over the PA in the press box and it's something that I'm like, I don't know if that's true. I'm seeking you out.
Thank you. Yeah.
well,
Um,
well, I had something that I wanted to do with you. I couldn't bring you on here and not drop some trivia and do something. So
for sure.
I think we both agree that this isn't a failure of a season. It's not a collapse by any means. They're going through a little bit of a rut that they have every opportunity to come out of Sunday against Tennessee.
Right.
However, I want to propose this from a hypothetical standpoint. If this football team in a first year, recalibration, as Dan Quinn and Adam Peters have stated, if they were to miss the playoffs after starting 7-2, from a collapse standpoint, would you put this? And I'm going to give you 2 to 3 scenarios, and I want you to tell me which one is the worst to you, and where does this year's team stack up to those? So I'm going to go, if I'm not mistaken, I put my thinking cap on here. 1979. I think Washington went to Dallas, had to win to make the playoffs, if I'm not mistaken, and they were winning in that game with 2 minutes left. If I'm not mistaken, the score was 31-28.
I think they had a two touchdown lead in that game and heading
Okay,
into the fourth quarter.
and Dallas comes back and scores. I think it was Tony Hill over
Tony Hill,
Tony
Staubach threw a little
corner
dink to
fade, or
Tony Hill in the end zone. Yeah.
yep, over Lamar Parrish, and
Right.
knocked Washington out. Washington was one of the best football teams in the league that year. And if I'm not mistaken, that was during the time where there were no wild cards. So you pretty much had to win your division to get in, if I'm not
There
mistaken.
was one wild card at the time, if I'm correct, or there may have been two per conference. Definitely one,
Hmm.
at least one per conference at that time.
Okay. So was
Yes.
that Washington team one of the best teams in the league that year?
They were one of the best, definitely. I mean, the Steelers by far.
Oh yeah.
I mean, that was a great season for them. But I wouldn't. I think you're kind of leading to the question: would you compare this season to that one in any way? I
Yeah.
would say no. That season, that was a very successful season. Unfortunately, that was a great comeback engineered by Staubach. I mean, who was like the master of comebacks.
Captain Comeback.
So right, Captain Comeback, right. So yeah, he engineered that late comeback, and so they lost that game. And also there was another game that took place that day. I think the Redskins still had like there was point totals, all point differentials decided also who got into the playoffs. So they still could have gotten in on a wild card. And there was another game that day where one team beat another by like 40 points.
Okay.
And that was unexpected. And the Redskins missed out on even a wild card that year. I think it was the Bears beating the Cardinals, or vice versa, Cardinals beating the Bears.
Okay,
And one of those two teams got in as the wild card, and the Redskins missed out, not only winning the NFC East, but not even getting in as a wild card team.
that's
So yeah,
unbelievable. Unbelievable. So now I'm going to talk about, these are more like games as opposed to durations of a season, but that we just mentioned them a second ago. They're the 83 team that lost to the Raiders in the Super Bowl in Tampa. I think the score was 38-9, if I'm not mistaken.
that is correct.
What is that to you the most heartbreaking loss or failure you've seen in Washington?
I would not say the most heartbreaking. I
Hmm.
mean, I think the first of all, the Raiders did some amazing things that game, and they had players back. I mean, you mentioned Marcus Allen,
Yeah.
and they had the two corners,
Haynes, Marcus
Hayes and Haynes.
Haynes. Yep.
I
Yep.
think they were missing Haynes in the regular season game.
They were.
And
Absolutely.
I
Yep.
think they had Lester Hayes, but they were missing Haynes. So what they did is they suffocated the Redskins wideouts. They suffocated Charlie Brown and Art Monk, who
Yep.
did virtually nothing that game.
Yeah.
So because of that, the Raiders defense was able to cram in the middle, and they stopped Riggins as well. So it was just an amazing game plan by the Raiders on both offense and defense. And Plunkett had a great game too. I would not characterize that as you said the most disappointing
Yeah.
loss in
Yeah.
Redskins history.
Yeah.
One of them, absolutely. I mean, you and I have seen so many letdowns by this team over
We.
the years. I mean, it's just been, it kind of like in the last 25 years, almost been one after another.
Yeah.
So, but I would not say, in terms of the magnitude of a game,
Yeah.
it,
That's what I mean, because those teams we've seen over the last 20 years here covering them, they weren't winning Super Bowls.
right.
So for that team in '83 to lose the way they did, for me, I remember that vividly because I was in sixth grade. I'll never forget it. I was in sixth grade, and that was the last time I was ever allowed by my father, rest his soul. But that was the last time I was ever allowed to cry over a team losing. I'll never forget. My father came in the room that night and told me,
Right.
"Why are you crying over this? Do you think those guys care?" He said, "Clearly they didn't. If you look at the way they played," he said, "So I don't ever want to see you cry over a loss for your team." So
So now that I think of it, I mean, maybe because of the magnitude of that game,
yeah,
it certainly warrants discussion as the most disappointing loss in Redskins history. You can also throw the 1972 Super Bowl in there, Super Bowl VII, George Allen losing to Don Shula. I think the Dolphins they were right for the pick in that day,
they weren't
and
favored.
the,
The
the
Dolphins.
Redskins just came in flat
Yeah, the
that
Dolphins
day.
going into that game were, what, 15-0 or 14-0, during the regular season. And they run through the playoffs and they get in the Super Bowl and they weren't even favored over
The
Washington.
Redskins were favored in that game. Yeah.
That's nuts right there. I was 1 year old, so I don't remember that, but I know the history of it. Can you
But can I,
think
let me
of
just tell you something? Let me
yeah.
just tell you something else about that the Super Bowl, the loss to the Raiders. So Theismann told me something really, really interesting.
Hmm.
He said because of all the hype of that Redskins team, having blown out the Rams in the first playoff game, I think it was 51-7. They
51-7.
barely they barely beat the 49ers though in the NFC Championship game.
If there
But
was more time in that game, the 49ers came back from 21-0 in that football game. People don't
right.
remember that. If there was more time in the game, the 49ers are winning that.
Right. And they got ripped off by the officials too. I
Yeah,
think there were
that
some really
was
bad calls in the
pass
fourth quarter.
interference call.
Yes, that was bad. So what Theismann told me is that the Redskins were reading their clips too much going
Mm,
into that Super Bowl against the Raiders. It had gone to their head basically. All
yeah,
all of the success they had had in 1983. All the media were saying this is the team. I mean,
yeah,
they're going to win it all. So it went to their head, and they just came into that Super Bowl unprepared.
yeah. I mean that was a magical season. I remember the Monday night Green Bay game where, they lost that game on a field goal,
Right.
and then they lost their. I think their didn't they lose their regular season finale against the Eagles, which was a kind of like a meaningless game because they were
They
resting
lost the first game of the season to the Cowboys.
to the Cowboys.
Those
That
were the two losses that season. It was to the Cowboys, the opening
okay.
game. That was the game that Darrell Green chased down Tony Dorsett, by the way. the
Yes.
opening game of the season. That they blew a big lead in that game too. The Redskins, I think, may have had a 3 touchdown lead in the first half of that game, and they blew it.
Oh
The
wow.
other loss of the regular season is the game you just pointed out to the
The Green Bay.
Packers,
Yeah.
48-47, which
Yeah.
was will go down as one of the greatest Monday night games ever.
If not the greatest Monday night game. That game kept me up all night. I remember I couldn't get up for school the next day. Whole nother story. But so let's do this. Let's talk about, you have a new book out, where you're talking about George Allen. We just referenced some of his teams, that the
Right.
72 team, we just referenced them. And George Allen had a great run here, for him not to win a Super Bowl in Washington. I think people don't understand that you can make a legit argument, and you're the historian. You tell me if I'm wrong, but you can make a legit argument that in the 70s, he was one of the top 3 or 4 coaches in all of football.
Right. I would say even before that, and I actually argue a bit of this in the book,
Hmm.
that his greatest years, in my opinion, were when he coached the Los Angeles Rams in the 60s. I
Uh,
think at that point, from like 66, the year he took over the Rams, through the 1972 season, he was one of the elite coaches in the league. There's no
so he
doubt
was
about it.
coach. So he was the coach, Mike, of the Fearsome Foursome.
He was coached the
I
Fearsome
did not
Foursome in
know that.
LA.
I just
He
learned
did
that.
not he did not acquire all those guys though.
Okay.
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 Deacon Jones, Merlin Olsen, Lamar Lundy, and
Hmm.
Rosie Greer were already there. But
Okay.
one of the amazing things that Allen did while he was there, Greer went down with an Achilles tear in the 67 preseason. Allen being Allen, I mean, he had this Rolodex of players who he thought could be available. He got Roger Brown from the Detroit Lions, who was a great defensive lineman at that point, and Allen
Hmm.
was able to get him right away. And Fierce and Foursome just kept rolling along. That 60 and Brown came in 67. That 67 team, in my opinion, was Allen's greatest year as an NFL coach. They were 11-1-2 in the regular season,
Wow.
and they lost to the Packers in the first round of the playoffs that year, but they beat the Packers in a late season game and then beat the mighty Baltimore Colts in the season finale. And the Colts that year also finished 11-1-2. And talking about teams in the playoffs, the Colts did not even go to the playoffs that year.
At
There were
11 and
four
2.
at 11-1-2. There were 4 teams in the NFL that went to the playoffs. Okay,
Ah,
at 11-1-2, the Baltimore Colts. That would be so unthinkable today.
ah,
It's so unfathomable that something like that could happen. So
yeah,
anyway,
prime.
to your point, though, he Allen was up there with Shula, Vince Lombardi, particularly well, in the 60s.
Hmm.
Allen was up there as one of the elite coaches in the league. He was up there with those guys, and even into the early 70s, he was up there with Shula as one of the best coaches in the league.
Wow.
It was after that 72 season that there was kind of like a little bit of a plateauing on the part of the Redskins. They were very good, but they were not one of the elite teams in the league from like 73 through 77, Allen's last 5 seasons in Washington.
So Lombardi came. Did he precede Allen or was he before him? He
He
preceded.
preceded Allen.
Okay.
Allen Lombardi was here in 1969. And
Okay.
actually, that was a winning season for the Reds because that was a 7-5-2 year. That
Okay.
was Lombardi did it. It was their first winning year since 1955.
Wow.
Unfortunately, Lombardi passed away
Yeah, cancer. Yeah. Hmm.
right before the 1970 season. But it's all discussion today whether how good that Redskins team really would have been. I remember speaking with Brig Owens, who bless his soul, he passed away 2 years ago.
Hmm.
He said, "Yeah, we would have been a championship caliber squad if Lombardi had stayed."
Wow. So
Yeah,
just another example of just tough luck. I mean, for this franchise, the things that it's had to overcome and endure. Um, Look, you've over the years, you've know all these former players and some of the oldest guys. If I were to ask you, in your opinion, from what you've seen and covered, who's the greatest Washington football player ever in your mind?
um, the greatest ever.
Hmm.
I would say, and this is because of his longevity,
I already know
plus
where you're
his
going.
accomplishments on the field,
Yeah.
and his Hall of Fame status. I would have to say Darryl Green.
Yeah, I would too. The only person that I think you could make a distinct argument could be another face of this franchise as far as the overall face. You could probably say Sammy Ball, but
I would say Sammy Baugh too.
it would
Exactly.
just be, most young people would not let that fly because they're caught up in the moment of today. But Sammy Ball was a great football player and pretty much got forward passing going in the game. Was really one of the first. And people don't realize this too, but he's also one of the best punters of all time.
And defensive backs.
Oh, I didn't know about the
Yeah,
defensive
he was a
back.
three-way player. Oh, that was
Oh,
back in the day when there was a single platoon
uh-huh,
system.
uh-huh.
So that's why he was great on both offense and defense. But he was also great at the quick kick, which was a sort of unannounced punt. Be like
Hmm.
third down, something like that. He was great
Nice.
punting. I mean, he has I believe he has the NFL record still today
Hmm.
for the greatest punting average in a single season, which was like 51.4 yards. Okay.
Wow.
Yeah. So he was a
Wow.
great three-way player, and of course, first ballot, or the very first year of the Hall of Fame, 1963, he was in. But yeah, I would say Dale Green and Sammy Baugh. Uh, Riggins, though, I do want to say, and I don't put him among those two, but Riggins pulled off the greatest single play in Redskins history.
You're talking about the touchdown run against the Dolphins.
Absolutely. Super
Super
Bowl
Bowl.
17. That
Yep.
fourth and one play, first of all, everybody knew Riggins was going to get the ball, which is
Everyone.
another thing that made that play great. Okay. And the Dolphins couldn't stop it. That was Riggins. And also, Riggins was known as this, he was seen as kind of like this shorter yardage type of back. The
Yeah.
guy was really fast.
Oh no, I mean at Kansas in college, he was on the track. He was one
He
of
was a
their
track star.
track star, 100
Absolutely. Yeah.
meter dasher. So yeah, he was. It's amazing because even the later part of his career, being bigger, more statuesque, he still was outrunning guys.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and I don't mean back in '81. I'm talking like literally a little couple years later, he still was outrunning guys. So he always had that speed. I remember one of his runs against the Cowboys in Dallas,
Remember that was a 79 game that you mentioned earlier.
oh wow, okay,
He
so
had
this
like a 65-yard touchdown run
absolutely, and
around
you
the
saw
corner
the
and down the sideline.
yeah,
Was
and no
that?
catching up. So that's pretty amazing. You know who you could say, John Riggins, and we have to keep this in perspective. But if I have to say, if someone said, who is John Riggins in today's game in modern times?
I can guess who you're going to say.
Derrick Henry.
Derrick Henry.
It
Yes.
has to be, right?
And John Riggins in his heyday, the 82, 83 seasons, basically,
Mm-hmm.
he was Derrick Henry is John, whatever, John Riggins of yesteryear.
Yeah,
Derrick Henry today is John Riggins of yesteryear.
yeah. No one wanted to come up and tackle that guy, period.
Oh, absolutely not. It hurt tackling him.
Absolutely. And we those are the times where we really had winners in DC. You don't have them anymore. We're talking almost a couple of days from December and we're having 65-degree weather. But back in those days, you knew coming to Washington in December, in January for playoff football, it was going to be cold. And then you have to tackle that large man. That's not going to get it done. So I do want to ask you though, the new book that you have, on George Allen, what inspired you to write this book?
Well, number one, I grew up in the DC area, and I became a true Redskins fan at the same time that Allen became the head coach here in 1971. And
Okay.
I would say a lot of that had to do with the fact that they were instant winners that year. I was 10 years old at the time.
Mhm.
I knew all the players' names and their numbers and everything. I would imitate the throwing motion of Sonny Jurgensen, Billy Kilmer. And at the same time, I was in sixth grade, uh, actually 72. And I remember I wrote a class paper called The Amateur Who Played Like a Pro. And the teacher thought it was a really good paper. And it was about a star football player at Ohio State who played in the Rose Bowl against USA. And back in those days, it was the Big Ten playing against the Pac 8 or Pac 10 in the Rose Bowl. I mean, that was a
Mhm.
yearly
Mhm.
thing. I wrote a class paper about it. I saw I had writing skills. And so wrote for my high school newspaper and college newspaper. And then it just, you know,
Was
it
was
was
the was the coach at Ohio State then? Was that Earl Bruce or was that before
it
him?
was Woody Hayes.
Oh, it was Wood. Oh, yeah. Wow.
Woody Hayes. This was the early 70s.
The Woody Hayes
So
that punched the kid on the sidelines.
right. You know who was in that game was Jeff Bostic, actually, Redskin. He played for Clemson at the time.
Oh,
I
really?
remember talking to him about it. Yeah, yeah. But so anyway, to answer your question, I mean, it was kind of like a confluence of different circumstances that took place. I mean, I gained a love for the Redskins, a love for sports, and a real liking for journalism, and convincing myself that I could pursue that as a career, and that is what I did. So after writing the Redskins Encyclopedia, which came out in 2007, and then the Vault, and then Joe Gibson Enduring Legacy, there was really another piece to the puzzle. And for me, that was writing a biography on George Allen. So
Okay.
I'm
Okay.
very
So,
happy that
so
I did that.
So this is one, and we'll let everyone know shortly as far as how you can get this book. And I implore you, definitely, support Mike. I mean, he's one of the best, man. Like he really is. Like again, for me,
Thank you, Lake.
I always tell you this, but my father told me a long time ago, if you're going to be in journalism, if you're going to do this, just like me as a basketball player, you need to know the history of what you're doing. And I've always taken that to heart. So I always try to learn, learn, learn. I learned 3 or 4 things today just talking with you. So I didn't know Sammy Ball was a three-way player. I never knew that.
Now you won't have
Um,
to be running over to me in the press box as often asking me
yeah,
historical stuff.
I mean, this is what I love it. I mean, I can't get enough of this history. And again, it puts things in perspective. When you see a young guy like a Jaden Daniels, when you know Dan Quinn's now a new coach, and the fact that they haven't had a GM since what Charlie Casserly. I mean, really, I mean, Vinny Serrato was not a general manager.
Right.
Ron Rivera was not a general manager.
Well, they
So
had what was the name of the guy? They had a guy in 2015,
um, um, Scott
McLuhan,
Scott McCloughan, yeah,
and he had some pretty good acquisitions, and they
he
they actually won
absolutely
the
did.
NFC East that year at 9-7.
Well, I'm going to safely say it. No one, we're not going to get in trouble for it. Um, I don't think Dan Snyder and company wanted Scott to put the team together the right way because they weren't their type of players.
Yeah.
He wanted to do it the old fashioned way, which was the way you're supposed to do it. And those guys may not have sold jerseys and things like that. So that's a whole nother story. But folks, these are the type of things that myself and Mr. Mike Richman here have been dealing with for multiple years covering this football team.
Right.
But before we go, I'm going to ask you something before we plug the book again. But before we go, I want to get your take on Jaden Daniels, what you see with this guy. Is he the first? Is he the first franchise quarterback? And I'm going to say it, and you and me, we've disagreed on this. To me, he's the first franchise quarterback this franchise has had since Sammy Ball. And I know you're going to say, well, what about Sonny Jurgensen and Billy Kilmer and those guys? They weren't drafted by this team and developed by this team and starred for this team in that in that pattern. So to me, Jaden could be the first since Sammy Ball.
Let me just say, I would kind of put Theismann in that category. I hear what you're saying about those other guys. Theismann really was first drafted by the Dolphins when they played in the Canadian Football League. So his first true taste of the NFL was with the Redskins.
Mm-hmm,
So he does check that box. In terms of Jaden Daniels, here's what I see. Okay,
mm-hmm,
first of all, he blew out the rest of the league in the first half of the season. We thought he was going to win the NFL MVP.
yeah,
If that happens now, who knows? Okay,
right.
but he's got all the elements to be a great quarterback and to be the franchise quarterback. He's got the arm, he's got the legs, he's got the smarts. Okay. We just need to be a little patient with him. I think next year will be, a little better. It'll give us a little better picture in terms
Okay.
of how good he can really be. It's all a learning experience for him. It's a growth process.
Yeah,
So, and like I mentioned before, NFL defenses catch up to these guys. It's kind of the way, with Lamar Jackson, for instance.
yeah,
I don't think personally he's ever going to take the Ravens to a Super Bowl win. Okay. I think if you shut down his running game, he's not going to beat you with the pass. Now, I think Daniels has an advantage over him.
mm-hmm,
Okay. He's got the arm and he's got the accuracy. Okay. I think in terms of your criteria, he could be the first franchise quarterback of this team. I'm not going
yeah.
to say it right now that he's going to be. He's got all of the
You're a tough grade.
He's got all of the elements, all the intangibles to be the franchise quarterback of this team.
All right. Well, good stuff. Good
That's
stuff.
I hope I characterized that
Oh no, that's
in a
fair.
way that
The only
I
thing
had
you
to
said,
couch. I had to couch it a little bit.
no, no, it's good. I liked it. The only thing you said in all of that that I don't agree with, I predicted the Ravens to win the Super Bowl this year, and I still do. After what I saw against the Chargers last night, if
Okay.
you just hand the ball off to that guy behind Lamar and
Okay.
don't
Derrick
put
Henry. Right. Yes.
yeah,
Yes.
and don't put
That's a
the
good point.
onus on Lamar to have to beat you all the time, they're going to be a tough tandem come playoff time to figure out. And, obviously Baltimore's defense is a shell of what it's been over the past few years. So that's probably going to be their Achilles when they have to play the Kansas Cities, the Buffaloes, Josh Allen of the world. Um, we in like 30 seconds or so, because I did want to get your take on this. I didn't bring it up yet. Is Jaden Daniels still rookie of the year? Or is Bo Nix on him right now from Denver?
I would say he's got to get back onto the track he was in the first half of the season to be that rookie of the year.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, I don't think he's going to be the MVP,
Yeah.
but
No, he's definitely not going to
he
be the
certainly
MVP.
could be the NFL Rookie of the Year. Or was it broken down NFC and AFC? I think.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so he could certainly garner that distinction, but he's got to get back on track
Yeah.
with much more consistency, like he was showing in the first half of the season.
Yeah. That's Cliff Kingsbury, but we'll talk about that some other time. So look, my friend, before we get out of here, I want you to be able to, you can plug your social media. You can let everyone know where they can buy this latest book that you have. Folks, Mike Richman, he's not just a friend, but he's one of the best in this business doing this. And he just got inducted into the Jewish Hall of Fame, Greater Jewish Hall of Fame here in the DC area. So now give us the book and where we can get it from.
Thanks, Lake. Just go to my website, MikeRichmanJournalist.com, and my book page is MikeRichmanJournalist.com/books. Get any get three of my books on there: the Redskins Encyclopedia, Joe Gibson Enduring Legacy, and George Allen: A Football Life. Unfortunately, my other book, The Washington Redskins Football Vault, sold out in its first printing
Oh,
in
wow.
2011. So there are no more copies of that. But the other three are there. And the great thing about buying these books through my site, I'll personalize them for you to anyone's liking once you put the order in. My Twitter handle is MSR_journalist. You can get me there. And I'm also on Facebook at Mike Richman.
All right, my friend, this was good. I told you I'd keep you on for 20 minutes. I didn't know we would go almost an hour, but
Do you
you
have
know,
time for one more comment about
oh, we
the
sure do.
Ravens?
Of course.
Okay, this is very interesting. Marvin Jackson and I, Marvin Jackson of the Sideline Report, which
Of
you
course.
appear
My
on
God.
all the time. We're having a great conversation, and also the sports anchor from the Norfolk station. Great conversation in the press box on Sunday about the Ravens Steelers, and particularly Mike Tomlin. Okay,
Okay. Okay.
I asked these guys, did you guys see the Steelers beat the Ravens the previous week?
Hmm.
They were incredible at ball hawking.
Yeah.
Okay,
Oh, yeah.
I know you saw that game.
Yeah.
Taking that ball away. That is Mike Tomlin. It starts with him. He's teaching those guys that stuff. And I think that's a major reason, not only the ball hawking, but his ability to shut down Lamar Jackson and the rest of the Ravens offense. Major reason that Tomlin has Harbaugh's number right now.
That's a great point because Baltimore, and if you think about what you're saying, it leaves credence because Pittsburgh didn't score an offensive touchdown in that football game, and
Right.
that still won because they created the turnovers and played the special teams game, something that we did not see Sunday here.
So we had the Mike Tomlin fan club going on in the press box.
Yeah, he's a good one, man. He's
Yes.
look, my friend, I appreciate you coming on. I gotta get you back on here real soon again. Hopefully we'll be talking about this team making the playoffs. I still think they are going to make the playoffs. Everything sits well for them going forward with the Titans. They're going to have the Eagles at home. That'll probably be their toughest challenge for the remainder of the season,
Right.
at least on paper. But you have to show up every week, as we were proven this past weekend, this past Sunday. If you don't show up, you're going to lose. Kansas City almost lost to the Carolina Panthers, so you have to show up. And I think that this was a learning lesson for them. They got that one stinker out the way. It's a little late in the season to have one, but every
Right.
team has one of those games every year, and they had theirs finally. So hopefully we won't be talking about that anymore. So look, my friend, I appreciate you coming on, and I'm going to have you back on real soon. Okay.
Thank you very much, Lake. I love the discussion and all the different topics we spoke about. Thank you for plugging my books, by the way.
Absolutely. I'll have you on real soon again. Okay.
Thank you very much.
All right. Take care. All right. But folks, Mike Richman, he's one of the best that does this. He really is. I mean, gentleman that I met years ago in the press box, and he really, he knows his stuff. Obviously, you can buy his books. To me, he's the guy. If you want to you know, learn more about the Washington, Redskins, formerly, now the Commanders. You want to know about the history. This is the guy to go to. I mean, he's really that dynamic, and you saw that today. This stuff wasn't scripted. There are no notes here. We just talk, and that's what we do. So, appreciate him for coming on. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll have our final segment of today's show. A little bit long, but still, it was good. So hang tight. We'll have more right here on the Lake Lewis Jr. Show. Final segment of today's Lake Lewis Jr. Show. I appreciate Mike Richman, Washington football historian, one of the best in the business at it. And congratulations once again to him for, being inducted into the greatest Jewish sports Hall of Fame, in the DC area. Well deserved. Hopefully this football team come Sunday, they understand the urgency of what they're playing for, and they come out and they play a strong football game and beat the Tennessee Titans. Titans feel pretty good about themselves, obviously having beaten last Sunday the Houston Texans, and they did that in Houston. So they're coming in feeling pretty good about themselves. Will Levis, former Penn State Nittany Lion, he did transfer, but he got his start at Penn State. He's playing good football right now. So Tennessee's not going to be an easy win, folks. It's going to be one of those games that Washington's going to have to bring their A game in order to win, and they have to get it back on track. Over the past 4 games, even going back to the Bears game where they did win on the Hail Mary, we all remember that play. They just haven't been in sync, and the offense hasn't looked like the offense that we saw for the first half of the season. They've got to get back to what they do well, and one of those things is running the football. Well, it's going to be a little bit more daunting because right now, here we are on Tuesday. I'm pretty certain that Austin Eckler won't be playing on Sunday, and it looks like Brian Robinson, who hurt his ankle, he may not be available. So we'll find that out tomorrow when we go back to practice. I'll be at practice giving you updates on what's exactly going on with this football team as far as the running backs. I do know that Chris Rodriguez, once I said earlier in today's program, was signed back. And obviously, he's going to be on the 53-man roster come Sunday. They're going to need him. But a player that I'm looking at, I want to see what they may do with Michael Wiley, the rookie back from Arizona. He's been on the practice squad all year, had a really nice preseason. So it's going to be interesting to see what they do. Are they going to have 3 running backs on the roster? So if Brian Robinson doesn't play, that knocks you down to 2. If Brian Robinson doesn't play, could there be a chance that Michael Wiley gets called up as well? So we'll see how all this stuff plays out. But again, my friends, I appreciate you joining me on today's program. Remember, you can follow me on social media at Lake Lewis Jr. on all formats, and you can subscribe to the podcast, The Lake Lewis Jr. Show. You can subscribe to it on YouTube. You see that button right there. If you're watching this, hit that. You can subscribe to it. And then you also can subscribe to it via audio format, Apple, Spotify, iHeartRadio, you name it, it's on there. So we're going to do this again later in the week after Thanksgiving. If I don't see you again, well, that's not true because you're going to see me tomorrow because I'm going to give you a practice recap. So practice recap comes up tomorrow. And then Thursday is a day for you to spend time with your family and friends, relish in the good times and reminisce on, from years past. It's one of those days where we all get a chance to eat and be around our loved ones. So make sure you get a chance to do that come Thursday. If you're not able to do that, reach out to me. I'd talk to you. I'd like to say hi to you just to make you feel a little better. Hopefully that will work for you. But again, my friends, I appreciate you joining me, and we'll have more coming back up here on the Lake Lewis Jr. Show. Take care.